This video is an introduction to model-based scheduling and will demonstrate how high-level sequencing is done using Synchro Pro. We'll start by creating custom resources and then use the model to create a high-level schedule, validate it, and then compare two different alternatives and check how they affect the cash flow on our project. Note that the first step can be skipped if you choose to automatically create resources when importing the models. Because we're creating a high-level schedule, let's group all of the piles in our project into one resource. To do this, we can simply box select all of the piles in our project, or just click on one, and then go to the 3D Objects tab, and while holding the Shift button, keep hitting the left arrow key until we get to the desired level. We can also take advantage of the Synchro Selection Levels feature. In this model, for example, when we choose level 6 as our selection level, clicking on a concrete element will select the whole concrete structure, including the piles. If we move to a higher level of detail in terms of selection levels, we will be able to select the piles and the rest of the structure separately. Let's assign all of our piles to a new resource called All Piles, and then following the same procedure, let's create resources for the rest of the structures in our project. Note that in this example we are grouping entire structural systems into single resources because we're creating a high-level schedule. However, keep in mind that we will always be able to ungroup these resources and further detail the schedule when we need to. Also, you may want to use the Ctrl-Shift-R keyboard shortcut to activate the resource wizard and quickly create new resources. Now that we've set up our resources, we're ready to start creating some tasks. Let's create a task called Construction with 3 subtasks called Concrete, Structural Steel, and Equipment. Now let's select the Concrete activity, choose an appearance profile. We can keep the default relationship set as finished to start for now, and at this point it may be easier to go back to leaf selection for the selection levels. Then go to the 3D view and click on one element from each resource in the order you wish to sequence them. Now we can right-click Create Tasks under Selected Task so that we create sub-activities under the concrete task, and then click on Yes to create separate tasks for each resource. The created tasks will carry the same names as their resources. We can change that, but let's keep it as is for now and input more realistic durations. Remember to click on Reschedule to update the critical path calculations. We can then slowly move the focus time through the Gantt chart to verify that the sequence works as expected. You might notice that the piling can hardly be seen in the 3D view due to the fact that the piles are underground. So let's make the main platform transparent while this task is active. To do this, we'll select a custom appearance profile that makes the resource transparent while the task is active, and then assign the platform to the piling activity. Now let's move the focus time slowly through the Gantt chart and see how the animation looks like. Now let's repeat the same process for the structural steel activities. Select the desired appearance profile, keep the default relationship to finish to start, select the structural steel activity, and click on an element from each resource in the same order you want them to be sequenced. Once you've done that, you can right-click Create Tasks under Selected Task and then click on OK to create separate tasks for each resource. Before updating the durations and clicking on Reschedule, let's set the relationship between the last 2 structural steel tasks as start to start rather than finish to start. Let's also set the structural steel activities to only start after the east-west concrete track has been fully constructed. The floating elements in our model will show us what still needs to be scheduled, and we can always run the focus time slowly through the Gantt chart to validate the current sequencing. Let's make a small adjustment to the appearance profile of the main steel structure so that it grows from bottom to top rather than left to right. Now let's select the 2 cranes and assign them to the first 2 structural steel activities so that they're only visible while these 2 tasks are active and that we can calculate equipment costs based on the durations of these 2 tasks. By dragging the focus time through the Gantt chart, we notice that the cranes will also be needed during the 3rd structural steel activity. So let's select these from the 3D tab and assign them to the 3rd activity. Now let's repeat our model-based scheduling process for the mechanical equipment resources in our project. When creating a high-level sequencing schedule, you may want to leave out some of the resources that you do not consider critical at this early stage of the project planning. At this stage, it's okay to unload these resources from our project to bring them back at a later stage when more detail is required. Let's review our current sequence by slowly dragging the focus time through the Gantt chart. It looks like we're now ready to add some basic cost estimates to our high-level schedule. From the Resources tab, let's add two new human resources called Concrete Crew and Steel Crew. And then from the Resource Properties tab, we can set a daily rate for the cost of using each resource. Now we can simply drag and drop to assign each crew to the set of tasks it belongs to. You can double check if the resource assignments are correct by clicking on the resource and inspecting the Tasks section in the Resource Properties tab. Let's customize the columns of the Gantt chart to show the labor costs we just assigned. Now we can show the earned value graph to visualize the cash flow if the current sequence is adopted. Now let's look at different alternatives and see how optimizing the sequence could affect our predicted cash flow. To do this, let's start by selecting all of the tasks in our schedule and saving a baseline. Now we can change some of the task relationships that were previously set as finish to start and see how that would affect our schedule. We can do this easily by selecting a group of tasks, then unlinking and relinking them as start to start. But always remember to go back to the 3D view and visually check if the sequence is valid. Note how the new green tasks in the Gantt chart compare to the baseline tasks in blue. Now let's select the main construction task and then show in the earned value graph the baseline cost to compare the two cash flows. It's also always a good idea to show the legend in the graph.